Welcome back to English at Work. I'm Jenny.
And I'm Alex. This is episode 3 of our Interview Mastery series.
In the last episode, we covered the most common interview questions. Tell me about yourself. What are your strengths and weaknesses? Questions like that.
Today, we're tackling a different type of question that many people find more challenging, behavioral interview questions.
These are the questions that start with, tell me about a time when, or give me an example of, or describe a situation where.
And here's why they're tricky. You can't just give a general answer. You need to tell a specific story from your actual experience.
A lot of people freeze up when they hear these questions because they can't think of a good example on the spot.
But by the end of this episode, you'll have a proven method for answering these questions confidently. We'll teach you the STAR method, give you examples, and help you prepare stories in advance.
Let's get started. Okay, Alex, let's start with the basics. What exactly is a behavioral interview question?
A behavioral question asks you to describe a specific situation from your past work experience. The idea is that past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior.
So instead of asking, are you good at handling conflict, they ask,
Tell me about a time you had a conflict with a coworker and how you resolved it.
I see. So they want real examples, not hypothetical answers.
Exactly. Anyone can say, oh, if I had a conflict, I would listen carefully and find a compromise. But a behavioral question forces you to prove you've actually done it.
What are some other common behavioral questions?
Oh, there are dozens. Tell me about a time you failed. Describe a situation where you had to meet a tight deadline. Give me an example of when you showed leadership. Tell me about a time you had to deal with a difficult customer.
So they're testing different competencies, leadership, problem solving, teamwork, communication, all through these specific examples.
Right. And here's what makes them hard. You need to think of a relevant story, remember the details, and tell it clearly while you're nervous in an interview.
That's a lot to juggle.
Which is why preparation is so important. You can't predict every question, but you can prepare a bank of stories that you can adapt to different questions.
We'll get to that, but first, let's talk about how to structure your answer once you've thought of your story.
Yes, this is where the STAR method comes in.
The STAR method is a framework for answering behavioral questions. STAR is an acronym, S-T-A-R. It stands for situation, task, action, result.
Okay, break down each part for us.
Sure. S is for situation. This is where you set the scene. What was the context? Where were you working? What was happening? This should be brief, just 2 or 3 sentences.
Give me an example.
Okay, let's say the question is, tell me about a time you had to deal with a difficult customer. Your situation might be, I was working as a customer service representative at an electronics retailer. A customer came in very upset because the laptop she had purchased the week before stopped working.
Okay, so you've set the scene. What's next?
T is for task. This is where you explain what your responsibility was or what needed to be accomplished. What was the challenge or goal?
So, continuing with that customer example.
My task was to resolve her issue quickly while following company policy, which stated that laptops could only be exchanged within 3 days, and she was past that window.
Okay, so now we understand the problem you faced. What's the A?
A is for action. This is the most important part. What specific steps did you take? This should be the longest part of your answer because they want to understand your thought process and what you actually did.
And this needs to be about what you did, not what your team did.
Exactly. Use I, not we. Even if you worked with others, focus on your specific contribution.
So what would the action be in this customer story?
First, I listened to her concerns without interrupting and apologized for her frustration. Then I explained the exchange policy, but I also told her I wanted to help find a solution. I ran a diagnostic test on her laptop and discovered it was a simple software issue, not a hardware defect. I fixed it in about 15 minutes while she waited. I also gave her my direct contact information in case she had any other issues and offered her a discount on her next purchase as a goodwill gesture.
So you walked through multiple steps you took. And finally, the R?
R is for result. What happened because of your actions? What was the outcome? And whenever possible, quantify it.
What would that be for this story?
The customer left happy with her working laptop. She actually came back 2 weeks later to thank me and made another purchase. She also left a 5-star review mentioning my name specifically. My manager shared it with the whole team as an example of great customer service.
I love that because you've got multiple results: the immediate outcome, the follow-up, and the recognition.
Right. And let me put the whole answer together so our listeners can hear how it flows. I was working as a customer service representative at an electronics retailer. A customer came in very upset because the laptop she had purchased the week before stopped working. My task was to resolve her issue quickly while following company policy, which stated that laptops could only be exchanged within 3 days, and she was past that window. First, I listened to her concerns without interrupting and apologized for her frustration. Then I explained the exchange policy, but I also told her I wanted to help find a solution. I ran a diagnostic test on her laptop and discovered it was a simple software issue, not a hardware defect. I fixed it in about 15 minutes while she waited. I also gave her my direct contact information in case she had any other issues and offered her a discount on her next purchase as a goodwill gesture.
That's probably about 90 seconds?
About that, maybe 2 minutes. That's the ideal length for a star answer.
What if someone asks, "Can you walk me through your thought process?" Should you include that in the action part?
Yes, good question. You can absolutely explain your reasoning. I chose to listen first before defending company policy because I knew she needed to feel heard. Then I looked for a creative solution that would satisfy her while still respecting our guidelines.
That adds depth. It shows emotional intelligence.
Exactly. Now let me give you some common mistakes people make with the STAR method.
Please do.
First mistake, spending too much time on situation and task. Some people take 5 minutes just setting up the story. Keep that brief.
What else?
Using we instead of I. They want to know what you did, not what the team did. Even in a team situation, highlight your specific contribution.
Another mistake?
Forgetting the result. Some people tell what they did, but never explain what happened because of it. Always close with the outcome.
What about negative results? What if the story didn't end well?
We'll talk about failure questions specifically in a minute, but in general, choose stories with positive outcomes. You want to showcase your abilities.
You mentioned earlier that people should prepare stories in advance. How do you do that?
Great question. You don't want to be scrambling for stories during the interview. Before you go in, prepare 6 to 8 stories that demonstrate different competencies.
6 to 8? That seems like a lot.
It's really not, and here's the beauty of it. You can use the same story to answer different questions. A story about meeting a tight deadline might also demonstrate leadership or problem solving.
Oh, that's smart. So what competencies should you prepare stories for?
The most common ones are leadership, teamwork, problem solving, conflict resolution, meeting deadlines, dealing with failure, going above and beyond, adapting to change, and customer service or client management.
How do you choose which stories to prepare?
Look at the job description. What skills are they emphasizing? If they mention cross-functional collaboration 5 times, you better have a teamwork story ready.
That makes sense. And where do these stories come from? Your current job?
Ideally from recent experience, the last 2 or 3 years. Current job is best, but previous jobs work too. You can even use volunteer work or school projects if you're early in your career.
Should you write these stories down?
Absolutely. Create a document with your stories. For each one, write out the situation, task, action, and result. This isn't a script you'll memorize, but writing helps you remember the details.
Can you walk us through how to develop one story from scratch?
Sure. Let's say you want a story about problem solving. Start by thinking, what's a time I solved a difficult problem at work? Maybe you remember when your team's main suppliers suddenly went out of business right before a big product launch.
Okay, so that's your situation.
Right. Now, what was your specific task? Maybe you were responsible for finding an alternative supplier and ensuring the launch stayed on schedule.
And the action?
Think through step by step what you did. Did you research potential suppliers, contact 5 companies, negotiate terms, coordinate with your team, visit a facility, write down each specific action.
And the result?
What happened? Did you find a supplier? Did the launch happen on time? Was it even better than expected? Include specific metrics if you have them.
So you're basically reconstructing the memory and organizing it into the STAR format.
Exactly. And once you've written it down, practice telling it out loud. You want it to sound natural, like you're telling a story to a friend, not reciting a memorized script.
How do you make it sound natural?
Practice it 3 or 4 times. The first time you tell it out loud, it might feel awkward. By the 3rd or 4th time, you'll find your natural rhythm. You might even discover you want to emphasize different details or phrase things differently.
What if you can't think of good stories? What if someone feels like their work is boring and they don't have impressive examples?
I hear this a lot, and here's the truth. You don't need dramatic stories. You don't need to have saved the company from bankruptcy. Regular, everyday examples of good work are perfect.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Let's say you're an administrative assistant. You might think your job is routine and unimpressive, but maybe you noticed that scheduling meetings for your team of 10 people was taking forever because of all the back and forth emails. So you researched scheduling tools, proposed using Calendly, trained the team on it, and cut scheduling time from 30 minutes per meeting to 5 minutes. That's a great problem-solving story.
So it doesn't have to be earth-shattering, it just has to show you took initiative and made things better.
Exactly. Small improvements are still valuable. In fact, they might be more relatable to the interviewer than some huge dramatic crisis.
Let's go through some specific behavioral questions and how to approach them. What's a really common one?
Tell me about a time you failed, or describe a mistake you made. People hate this question.
Why?
Because they're afraid admitting failure will disqualify them. But here's the thing, everyone fails. The interviewer knows that. They want to see if you can learn from mistakes and take responsibility.
So what makes a good failure story?
Choose a real failure, but not a catastrophic one. Don't tell them about the time you got fired for misconduct or cost the company $1 million.
What kind of failure should you choose?
Something moderate, where you learned a valuable lesson. And the key is to spend more time on what you learned and how you improved than on the failure itself.
Give me an example.
In my first project management role, I was assigned to lead a website redesign. I was so excited to prove myself that I jumped right into designing without first establishing clear requirements with stakeholders. Halfway through the project, the marketing director said the design didn't align with the brand refresh they were planning. We had to start over, which delayed the launch by 6 weeks and frustrated the team. I learned the critical importance of stakeholder alignment before beginning any project. Now, I always start projects with a detailed kickoff meeting where we document requirements, get sign-offs, and establish clear communication channels. Since then, I've led 8 projects, and all of them came in on time because of this disciplined approach.
I like that because you admitted a real mistake, but then you showed how it made you better at your job.
Right, the failure is in the past, but the lesson is something you still use today. That's what they want to hear.
What's another common behavioral question?
Tell me about a time you had a conflict with a coworker. This one makes people nervous because they don't want to seem difficult to work with.
So how do you answer this without throwing anyone under the bus?
Choose a story about a professional disagreement, not a personal one. Maybe you and a colleague had different ideas about the best approach to a project. Show that you respected their perspective, communicated clearly, and found a solution.
Can you give an example?
I was working on a marketing campaign with a colleague from the creative team. I wanted to use a data-driven approach with A/B testing to optimize our messaging, while she preferred to go with her creative instincts based on years of experience. We were both pretty passionate about our approaches. Instead of arguing, I suggested we try a hybrid approach, use her creative concept, but test different variations of it. I showed her some case studies of how A/B testing had improved similar campaigns. She agreed to try it. We launched her design with 3 message variations and tested them. One version performed 35% better than the others. She appreciated seeing the data, and I appreciated that her creative concept was the foundation. We've collaborated really well ever since.
That's great because you didn't criticize your colleague. You framed it as two professionals with different perspectives finding a solution together.
Exactly. Never badmouth former colleagues or bosses. In an interview, even if they were truly difficult, find a diplomatic way to tell the story.
What about tell me about a time you showed leadership? Not everyone has been in an official leadership role.
That's okay. Leadership doesn't always mean managing people. It can mean taking initiative, influencing others, or guiding a project.
So you can show leadership even as an individual contributor.
Absolutely. Maybe you noticed a process that wasn't working well, proposed a change, got buy-in from your colleagues, and led the implementation. That's leadership.
Give me an example of that.
At my previous company, I noticed our sales team was spending a lot of time answering the same basic questions from prospects. Even though it wasn't part of my role as a marketing coordinator, I saw an opportunity to help. I proposed creating a comprehensive FAQ page and a series of short video tutorials addressing these common questions. I didn't have formal authority, but I presented the idea to my manager and the sales director with data showing how much time this could save. They approved it. I coordinated with subject matter experts, wrote the FAQs, hired a videographer, and launched the resource page. Within 3 months, the sales team reported saving about 5 hours per week, and our website engagement increased by 25%. The sales director actually asked me to present the project at our quarterly all-hands meeting.
So you showed initiative, influenced stakeholders, and delivered results, all without being a formal manager.
Right. That's leadership.
One more. Tell me about a time you had to work under pressure, or describe a time you had to meet a tight deadline.
This is testing whether you can stay calm, prioritize, and deliver quality work when things get stressful.
What makes a good answer here?
Show your process. How did you prioritize? How did you stay organized? How did you communicate with others? And of course, show that you successfully met the deadline.
Example?
2 days before our annual conference with 500 attendees, our keynote speaker got sick and had to cancel. As the event coordinator, I had to find a replacement immediately. I stayed calm and made a plan. First, I reached out to 3 industry leaders who I knew had spoken at conferences before. One was available but needed the presentation deck by that evening to prepare. I worked with our team to adapt our materials, briefed the new speaker on the audience and key messages, and coordinated last-minute logistics like updating printed programs and the website. I also prepared backup options in case something fell through. The new speaker was excellent. Attendees rated her 4.8 out of 5, and several people told me it was the best session of the conference. My boss later told me she was impressed by how I handled the crisis without panicking.
That shows you can handle pressure, problem solve quickly, and stay focused on the end goal.
Exactly. And notice I mentioned specific actions, reaching out to speakers, adapting materials, preparing backups, not just I worked hard.
What if you get asked a behavioral question and you can't think of a relevant example? What do?
First, don't panic. Take a moment to think. It's okay to say, "That's a great question. Let me think for a moment."
How long can you pause?
5 to 10 seconds is fine. It shows you're thinking carefully rather than just making something up.
But what if you genuinely can't think of an example?
You have a few options. First, you can ask for a clarification. Could you give me a bit more context about what you're looking for? For example, are you interested in conflicts with peers, with managers, or with clients?
That buys you time and might help you remember something.
Right. Second option, you can pivot to a similar situation. I haven't encountered that exact situation, but I did face something similar where, and then tell a related story.
What if you truly have never experienced anything close to what they're asking?
This is rare if you've prepared your story bank, but if it happens, be honest. I actually haven't been in that specific situation yet. However, here's how I would approach it based on my experience with. Then describe your approach hypothetically, but grounded in principles you've used successfully.
That's better than making something up.
Much better. Interviewers can usually tell when you're fabricating a story, and if you get caught lying, you're done.
What about questions that feel like traps? Like, tell me about a time you disagreed with your boss.
These aren't really traps, but they do test your judgment. You need to show you can respectfully push back when appropriate, but you also need to show you're not difficult or insubordinate.
How do you walk that line?
Choose a story where you disagreed about a work approach, not company policy or values. Show that you presented your perspective professionally with supporting reasoning, but ultimately respected your boss's decision.
Give me an example.
My manager wanted to launch a new feature without beta testing at first because of time pressure. I respectfully raised my concern that skipping testing could lead to bugs that would frustrate users and require more time to fix later. I showed her data from a previous launch where we'd skipped testing and had problems. She appreciated my input, but decided we needed to prioritize speed this time. I respected her decision and worked extra hours to do as much internal QA as I could. The launch went mostly smoothly, though we did have a few minor bugs. Afterward, my manager thanked me for my diligence and said she'd factor in more testing time for future launches.
So you showed you could voice a concern professionally, but you weren't bitter or difficult when the decision didn't go your way.
Right. And there was a positive outcome. Your manager actually took your feedback for future projects.
What if someone asks about a time you broke a rule or bent the rules?
Be very careful with this one. Don't describe breaking important rules like safety regulations or ethical guidelines.
So what can you talk about?
You might describe a time you found a creative workaround within the system, or a time you escalated an issue to get approval for an exception. The key is showing good judgment and getting proper authorization when needed.
Okay, let's recap what we've learned about behavioral interview questions.
First, behavioral questions ask about specific past experiences. The interviewer wants real examples, not hypothetical answers.
Use the STAR method to structure your answers: situation, task, action, result. Keep situation and task brief, focus most of your time on action, and always close with the result.
Prepare a story bank of 6 to 8 examples before your interview covering different competencies like leadership, problem solving, teamwork, conflict resolution, and handling pressure.
Write your stories down using the STAR framework, then practice telling them out loud until they sound natural.
For failure questions, choose a moderate failure and focus on what you learned. For conflict questions, stay professional and show how you found a solution.
If you can't think of an example, it's okay to pause and think. Ask for clarification if needed, or pivot to a similar situation.
Never make up stories or lie. Interviewers can tell, and it will cost you the job.
Next episode, we're covering one of the trickiest parts of interviews, answering difficult questions like salary expectations, gaps in employment, and questions about why you left your last job.
These are the questions that make people really nervous, but we're going to give you strategies to handle them with confidence.
Until then, this is Jenny
And Alex from English at Work. Start building that story bank, and we'll see you next time.